Hello, hello. Good afternoon, morning, wherever you're calling in from on this Friday. So happy Friday. We are so excited to be back for another live recording of our Innovating Out Loud series. This is live recording number two. If you missed the first one, it was all about behavior change and innovation, and it was extremely fascinating. We will send you that link as a follow-up. But today, we are talking about a topic that is impacting all of us. I think I can confidently say that AI transformation. And we're talking about it with two of the best, Joanne Garbin and Dean Carnigan. Joanne and I, of course, are founding partners of Regenerous Labs behind this Innovating Out Loud session. And Dean is inside Microsoft navigating the AI transformation firsthand with a large team. And so what's really interesting as we tap into this conversation, you'll be able to hear how how things are unfolding at that scale and how you can apply it down to whatever size type of organization you're leading or working in. There'll be tons of takeaways. And as we preface this is intentionally called Innovating Out Loud with a tagline of saying it ugly. So this is live, and our whole purpose is to have an active conversation that is really insightful, interesting, and helps you. But before we dive into that, Joanne, maybe a really quick intro from you, if those of people who are on don't know you, and then Dean, if you would follow her and give an intro to yourself, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. So I am a co-author of The Insider's Guide to Innovation at Microsoft with Dean. And probably the best intro I can give you for today, for anybody that doesn't know me, is that in the book, we really leaned into our roles as I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, although I spent a little time inside Microsoft and some other biggies. And Dean has been a lifetime entrepreneur, although he spent some time outside. And I preface it that way because we are well practiced at saying it ugly, and Taryn's going to keep us in control because we wrote the book by doing exactly this, going out, talking to people, recording interviews with them, and then me and Dean going back and talking it out. So I'm really excited to have started the year saying it ugly with Dean, and we're really ending the year
Yeah.
saying it ugly.
Yeah. Well said. Yeah. So I'm Dean Carignan. I think my proudest professional credential is being Joanne's co-author on the book Innovation at Microsoft. I'm 20 years at Microsoft. I've worked in multiple disciplines, as we'll probably talk about later. I'm a boundary crosser, and do a lot of connection and building bridges within the company. Um, Lately, I've been working on AI in sort of two contexts. One is building the platforms and the tools that we as Microsoft ship. And then the second is encouraging our engineering discipline to really make AI central to how they work. And you might think that would just come naturally to kind of a technology company, but we are also a large corporation and we experience, a lot of the same adoption patterns as any large corporation. So in that sense, this has been kind of an supplement to my technical work, but super interesting and allows me to tap into a lot of the learnings from the book that Joanne and I wrote.
Awesome. So wealth of knowledge on this call, wealth of
Yes.
knowledge. Um, let's first just kind of start. I'd love to hear from both of you, your perspective of the overall AI, adoption gap, hype curve. What are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you learning? What's your take on it?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in first. When I started working on AI adoption, the first thing I did was I went into my garage and unboxed my dusty, dog-eared copy of Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm, because it is almost to a letter going to unfold, I think, according to that particular mental model. And in that model, of course, you have early adopters and innovators who naturally embrace a new technology. And then you have the early majority, the late majority, and the laggards who come along later. But what's really critical is that chasm between the people who are happily and proactively adopting and those who are kind of waiting to see, is this technology really going to work out? And so a lot of what seems to work is taking the people who have adopted and sharing their lived experience with AI with those who are a little more reluctant. And in general, we find that is a more authentic and more genuine way to get sort of the early majority motivated because it's not a formal learning program, it's not a mandate from the top, but it's taking people who are really flourishing because they're using AI and demonstrating that experience to the people who maybe are on the cusp but not quite ready to make the jump.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I I'll add to that, it's give you a little bit of timeline just for perspective. So when Dean and I were writing the book, um, GPT wasn't out in the
Mhm.
world in a major way. It came out as we were writing the book. And it came out in time that we were able to include a GPT generated epic poem in the Bing chapter. And I look, and we knew when we put that poem in the book, we were like, this is gonna date quickly. It's still cool and fun, makes me laugh. But now, when I'm talking to the early adopters, the innovators using AI, we're down at the command line now. And I'm somebody who never wrote code before in my 25 years of tech. I now open up Terminal on my computer and work with Claude to pull things from files and it's like that's a mind-blowing shift, but it's also not what most people are doing. It is a fractional amount of people that have progressed from writing epic poems and, fun videos and pictures to that level.
Mhm.
What we're seeing is very normal in the adoption of a paradigm shifting technology that those innovators, yeah, they're out and running. The early adopters are now starting to think about productivity workflows. The ones ahead of the curve are thinking about the intersections of their workflow with other workflows. But most people are still using just the chat interface
Mhm.
as a better search engine or, for recipes, for pictures, for things like that. So we're still very early days.
Hmm.
Maybe I can just add to that because our own adoption curve, which you've described, Joanne, I think the reason it was successful was we started using AI to do something that was very important to us. And so we used it for the poem. We used it for to get ourselves unblocked when we were writing the book. We did write every word in the book ourselves in the end. So I'm very proud of that we were like human in control, AI serving as a tool. Um, but we were motivated to work through some of the challenges or limitations of the current systems because we were building something with AI. And I think that's one of the biggest recommendations is if you go out and try to learn AI in the abstract, once it gets hard, you're going to lose some of your motivation. But if you're learning it in an applied context, your motivation will be much higher because the payoff is higher. You'll not only build the skills, but you'll build some artifact, whether it's a website or a paper or PowerPoint deck. And so I see that as well, in my day-to-day work is approaching a very specific problem with AI is just a much better way to get started.
Yeah, that's great. I think there's something kind of interesting happening along this, hype and adoption curve that I think would be great to expand upon. But if you start at the very front of it, right? We've moved past this point, but there was all this hype of what AI could do and what has the potential, for it to unlock. And that's where a lot of people, started engaging. They saw the hype and they saw the potential. We're at an interesting point now where people are thinking it can do all these wonderful things, and it can, but it's maybe not quite at the level they've hoped for. Maybe the hype that they are expecting to experience is actually higher than the current capabilities of AI. And Dean, we talked about this when we were prepping for this. It's one of the observations you brought. And so we're at this interesting point where we're seeing adoption maybe start to fall off a little bit
Mhm.
because people have these grand expectations for how AI is going to fix everything. But when they're actually doing it, they've got to the point where they're trying it, they're not seeing results that they intended to. So they kind of back away. Maybe some of those early adopters are even now people who are non-believers in the technology. So expand upon that, unpack that, and then we'll maybe get into some ways that you can overcome that or ways to baby step that.
Yeah, that's great. I have kind of two thoughts on that. One is, I'm old enough to have lived through the internet hype cycle as
Mhm.
well, and I think that's helped me to parse the hype that comes with AI.
Sure.
Um, but I think the easiest way to cut through it is to use AI to learn about AI. And any, reasonable ChatGPT Copilot now will have a research mode where you flip it into research mode and you say, go read everything on this topic. Let's say it's what AI can do in the creative arts, whatever you're interested in. And you specifically prompt it to give me a balanced perspective, give me the yes, no, views on this topic, and let it go and read everything and get into probably some of the more arcane sources that you might not come across, in the news cycle, and really start to form your own opinion. And then couple that research with a little bit of hands-on, just get on and try or talk to people who are trying. We have something we call the sampling rate, which is the frequency with which you go back and try a given AI tool. And the tools are improving at a pace that we've never seen in software or any area of engineering. And so just because it can't do what you want this week, there's a pretty good probability in 2 weeks it will. And so we talk a lot about individuals sampling regularly, or teams or even companies getting organized, and we call it delegated sampling. So this is
Mhm.
the idea of, say, one person can't stay on top of all of the tools. So let's distribute the load and let's have people jumping in every couple of weeks and testing and then sharing their learnings. And that, I think, will help you to cut through the hype, but also avoid the anti-pattern where someone tries a tool, an AI tool, it doesn't work, and then they just write off AI. We see that a lot in a variety of companies, just people saying it doesn't work. I tried it and they don't come back for 6 months or sometimes ever. So that kind of structured sampling, I think, is really critical. And again, it's not something we normally do in our day to day. It's a new habit that we have to systematically form.
Yes.
It,
Awesome. Joanne, before you build on that, I forgot to mention at the start, we will have Q&A at the end, the last about 10 to 15 minutes, and there is a chat feature here. So as you have questions that come up, we encourage you to drop those into the chat and then we'll circle back on them at the end. Just want to make
yeah.
that fun.
So we have a joke in the lab because we're building with AI. Our first product has multiple models in it, layers. It's actually quite, we're on that leading edge. But we were stuck like 3 weeks ago, maybe less than. There was just a lot of stuff we were having to figure out how to get around, like, and we're building with Claude and at the core, and we have a joke. We're like, oh, it's behaving like Claude. It's not quite Claudette yet. Like when it's Claudette, we know it's going to do what we ask it to do. And but then like a new .NET library came out, and this is super techie. So for the techie people on the line, but it's just a developer tool that Claude Anthropic released in the Azure ecosystem, and it solved all the problems we were running into. And within a week, we incorporated the new tools, and everything we had been hitting against the wall went away. And now we're like, okay, well, here's the next things we want to solve. And so, what's really interesting about it is for those people in product development, at the start of building, we had to rethink product design and specification because you're not like this screen goes to this thing goes to that it's not deterministic, right? So if you're incorporating generative, I can't say it today, logic into your thing, you got to think about how to tell it what to do in a way that you can verify and QA and all that. And then in the product development life cycle, you got to think about, well, how do we build it in such a way that we're using everything it's capable of in this moment and affording us the ability to change it next week when the tools change again.
Mhm.
So that's been interesting on the product side. And then on the day-to-day side, it's like you said, it's not being afraid to just try it and try it for an hour on a Saturday or a Tuesday night or something. Try to do something with it. I was at a wine and cheese at my neighbor's house. And there was a group of us just chit-chatting. And I whipped up a little, my new party trick is to whip up little web apps using my phone. And we were talking about NFL um like fantasy football. So I whipped up a little fantasy football app on my phone and sent it to my friends. And they were like, "Oh my God, how did you do that?" And it was literally Claude did it, right?
Mhm.
But it brought up something I wanted to mention, which was one of my neighbors was getting inbound requests saying, "Hey, I'm a financial planner. I can teach you how to use AI for finance for $1,500."
Mhm.
And I was just like, "No, don't do that." One, all of the
I
big
can teach
tech
you how to do it for
companies,
wine and cheese.
yeah, right? Like call your neighbor, they'll help you. Google and Microsoft and all of the big tech folks are giving free AI coursework
Yeah.
Mhm.
because they want you to know how to use the tools. And then to Dean's point, you just gotta kind of, it's a thing you have to work with. Like you're
Yeah.
not going to get good at it reading about it.
I do think there are two sides. I think there's the personal side, like me as a human, me as Taryn using AI. But then there's like this organizational team using AI. And where those are fundamentally different is in the team size, right? It's a lot more, there's a lot of complexities. It's you're defining new ways of working together. And a lot of
Mhm.
that even goes back to what we tied in last time. It's about behavior change and
Mhm.
it's about thinking about how you collectively approach problems
Yeah.
differently or find solutions in a whole new way, which I think like on one, it's maybe a little easier to conceptualize. It's, oh, I can meal plan differently. That's not, too much of a stretch. But when you think about people changing their craft, I mean, a
Mhm.
lot of developers and Dean, their craft is writing code, and we're asking them, right, to kind of change that. Other people's crafts are, architects and engineers and designers, and
Yeah.
you're asking them to change something that's kind of deeply personal and really hardcore rooted into their workflows with, potentially hundreds of others at the same time. So
Yeah.
talk about the dynamics of
Yeah.
that team change.
Yeah, I'm so glad you went there. And this is where, there's point adoption of AI, where a person kind of starts using it. And that's critical, and that often sparks the broader organizational adoption.
Hmm.
Um, the anti-pattern here is where a team starts using AI, but doesn't change the way they work,
Yeah.
the flows, the processes, all of that. And that's the hard part, frankly, because that is classic change management. It is unlearning old habits and learning new habits. And the real challenge with that is the old habits are usually invisible.
Mhm.
You don't even know what they are because you've been doing things through routine for so long. And
Old
so
habits
what
die hard is a saying for a reason.
Exactly. And so, one of the things we recommend to anyone who wants to go AI first is, use one of these kind of classic workflow analysis tools like a Gemba walk or event storming, anything that kind of surfaces those invisible systems
Hmm.
that are ingrained through years and years of doing work. And then you overlay the AI tools and you start to say, okay, this tool could help us reinvent this part of our flow. And, this part really needs human oversight. So we're not going to touch it. And maybe this one can get a little bit of automation. And two things happen then. The benefits of your transformation go up because you're reinventing the way you work.
Hmm.
And the complexity surrounding the AI tools goes down because you don't have to learn every single tool, every single technology. You can pinpoint the ones that you're going to use to actually change your workflow.
Mm.
And so that is a huge benefit of starting workflow first. And it's funny because it resonates with a big point in the book,
Yeah.
which is, we say people should choose a customer experience that they're building for before they choose the technology.
Yeah.
And so it's very similar. It's
Thanks.
decide the what before you decide the how in terms of the tech. And we really see that helping teams, but it's
And
not in their nature.
most people are flip-flopping that. They're starting with the tech and they're
Yes.
figuring out how do I incorporate AI into what I'm doing. Versus in the book, right, the framework is BXT, so the business,
Yes.
the experience, the technology, versus starting with the X, the experience or the workflow, and really getting your head around what can I change here? How might this change? And then you figure out the tool. And
Yep.
Joanne,
That's,
build on that thought.
yeah.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with AI. This
Hmm.
is the innovation basics. This is business growth basics, right? Like the businesses that thrive and the people that thrive in them lead with value creation. They lead with the customer experience. And sometimes your customer is your teammate or your greater organization. And so then you build the business model and the technology to support that vision that you had. I was just on a vision webcast with the host of Finding Mastery, Michael Gervais, and just even that act of what future do I want to create? And what
Hmm.
does it look like? Who am I in that future? That's something that has nothing to do with AI. Like that is all you and your desires and your imagination. And the neat thing about AI in a very digital world is that it now allows more of us to self create our visions. Whereas,
Hmm.
like, again, going back to my history, 25 years of building things, I've always had to have engineers on the payroll or paying them with pizza and beer
Yeah. Yeah.
to prototype my visions. And now I can do a lot of that work myself and I can try a lot of things and just, it's like building with Legos, you know? It's like you can just, yeah, you can follow the blueprint or you just dump the box on the ground and start building things. And at the organizational level, it becomes so valuable because we all know you can be really good at your job, but if all the people that you need to get whatever done aren't also on the ball or have the time or all those handoffs, like we talk in the book, those
Hmm.
baton passes, that's where stuff gets dropped,
Yeah.
right? And so much good work doesn't move forward because we're not solving at the intersections in the workflow.
I just want to build on that for a second. Is so important is that really AI allows you to blur the boundaries between disciplines. And, historically, you might have a customer analyst who looks for needs, a designer who kind of creates a prototype, one engineer, an architect who creates a working, structure, and then maybe 1,000 engineers who go and actually build the product. And you lose knowledge and information at every phase just because when we communicate through product requirement documents and specs and things, they can only capture so much.
Like that
Yeah.
telephone game, you play as kids, like every
Yeah.
time you pass it on, something gets changed or lost or misinterpreted.
Exactly. And then usually the upstream people have disbanded and gone on to their next project, so downstream. And so this idea that you might be a design person and you might write a design plan, and then you can actually code up a working prototype as opposed to just a wireframe. And you can actually go back and take that working prototype to customers before a line of code gets built by an engineer. And then you deal with that. Oh, now that I see it, what I really need is we've all experienced that. And usually the customer only sees it after it's 80% built and it's too late to actually iterate. And so that idea of getting to a prototype, iteratively getting feedback, and when you really know what you want to build, that's when the engineers and the software developers come in and really make it hardened and scalable.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mm.
we got to say the quote from the book.
Yeah.
One of the heads of design at Microsoft, John
Yes.
Friedman, if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures.
Yes.
So in the design world, putting something on the table for people to throw darts at has always been a practice. But now, to Dean's point, you can put a prototype in front of your client or your coworkers and be like, "What I get wrong? What I get right? Would you use this thing?" And it is, 1,000 times better than a picture.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanna go a couple of clicks deeper. So I think you did a great job at kind of painting the what, how do we improve adoption, right? Increase sampling rates, revisit tools, start with X or the workflows. But what does that actually look like in practice? Like
Mm.
how does that show up? How do you do that, really well for a team? And there was something Dean you said too, that being AI first. I think it'd be
Mhm.
really interesting, like what does that mean to both of you? And then how do we implement all this stuff that we've just talked about, right? If we,
Yeah.
yes, I see so many people like, I understand at least kind of conceptually, yes, try it, yes, experiment, yes, I got to change mindsets, but it's getting caught up in how do we actually go about it? So just
Yeah.
share your thoughts on that.
Yeah. A couple of thoughts. One is the single biggest factor I see holding back AI adoption is really the fact that it requires time to achieve any level of mastery or knowledge, and
Mm,
people just feel they don't have the time.
mm, mm.
And it requires dedicated time. It requires not just dabbling, for a half hour on your lunch break.
Sure.
So one of the things that we have done is we've started to talk a lot about payback period, which is if you invest 2 days in learning AI for a big part of your workflow, that will be paid off within, say, 3 weeks, and then you're just accruing more and more time. This helps managers to get, comfortable with the idea that I'm going to take someone off the front lines, and that's going to cost me time, but I'm going to get it back ideally within the month. Another heuristic, actually not mine, but I've heard others using it, is the rule of five. And if you do anything 5 times in a month, you should automate it with AI. And just the idea that and that level of repetition makes it a good candidate. Um, and then I think the other practical factor that's super important is you're not just learning AI, but you're reinforcing the habits. And so, some ways that people will do that is just having a day of learning that's AI learning, and it comes up every month, or even every couple of weeks, changing the environment of people's work. So one of the things I've done is I have M360 Copilot just be the first thing I see in the morning. And
Mm,
that way, instead of going in and answering emails, the first thing I do is I say, summarize my inbox and tell me who I need to get back to immediately. And then I'll usually send it off on a couple of research tasks that it can work autonomously on.
mm,
Um, but just starting with AI as the first thing I engage with, it's kind of disruptive of the old habits and
mm,
it kind of gets me in that mindset. So, no silver bullet, but it's really fundamentally that idea of building the new habits and getting to a point where they stick. And there's research that sort of says it varies by, what you're doing, but sort of 6 to 8 weeks of repetition seems to be the point where work habits start to stick. So,
mhm.
especially as managers, being cognizant of that, carving out the time, asking people in every single one-to-one, did you use AI? What did you use it for? How did it work? And creating a forum for people to exchange what's working and what's not seem to be some practical tools that I see working. But I'd love to hear Joanne's thoughts.
I have I have two thoughts, and they're definitely leaning into the say it ugly theme. One is managers, leaders, especially executive leaders, they need to talk about how they're using AI.
Yeah.
Not just, I want you to use AI. Satya just put a video out of him in India on stage in front of a crowd calling up his environment and trying to make an app, the
Mhm.
CEO of the company back to dev 101 level.
Yes.
It's
But
powerful.
even if he didn't succeed or whatever he was building, just the fact that people that report to him trust that he's using the tools, I think that is a huge gap right now that I'm seeing is a lot of companies we talk to, the mandate is there, but the modeling of the behavior is missing.
Mhm.
The other part that I'll say ugly is I remember being at Microsoft and having a calendar full of meetings, and most of them were informational, not co-creational. And I wonder if you can just start sending your co-pilot to
Mhm.
those meetings for you, and all of those hours that you would have been sitting there listening to somebody multitasking, and
Yep.
just let your co-pilot like take notes, and
Yep.
you take that 2 hours and go play with AI.
That is so. I'm so glad you mentioned that because I it's been funny that I've seen just meetings. They flip from being, me as a required to me as a tentative. And what I do is I have Copilot just read the transcript of the meeting and say, give me a summary, what was most relevant for me. And this is the other kind of thematic thing that people should be thinking about is digital exhaust is really any information that's thrown off by your day-to-day work that you can capture and actually use when you're sort of provisioning an AI to go and do something. So, I have a series of meetings on my calendar where I meet with customers. And I used to meticulously take notes and summarize them and break them into themes and categories. Now I just say, to Copilot, go read the transcripts from all those meetings. It can find the ones that have customer in the subject line and give me the recurring themes. Then I'll actually just say, once we've seen those themes, go out and read external research on this particular customer set or this industry, and tell me if what we're hearing from our customers matches with what third-party research is kind of doing. And so there's two things that happen when you capture the digital exhaust. One is you attend fewer meetings, but you get richer information from those meetings. And then it frees up time, exactly as Joanne says, to be more hands-on with the AI and kind of building up your competency. So someone I was talking to recently, they said they, instead of a to-do list now, they have a to not do. And they basically list the things that they don't want to do that they find low impact and repetitive and boring. And a lot of that is attending meetings. And they just say, okay, I have my co-pilot go and sit in and summarize for me. So that again is another habit that's very antithetical to how we've all worked for decades, which is the not to-do list as opposed to the to list.
Yeah. Dean, explain digital exhaust one more time. What does that term mean?
Yeah, so if you think about it, like this podcast is creating digital exhaust right now. Every word we say, the people who are here live will probably retain maybe, if we're lucky, 10% of what's said. But if we share with them the transcript, they can put that in, a store somewhere, OneDrive SharePoint, and as they have questions about AI adoption, and assuming they're using kind of an agent like M365 Copilot or ChatGPT or others, they can then, as long as they make the agent aware that those transcripts where they are, you just say, summarize everything I've heard about AI adoption in the last 6 months. So there is a process by which you have to think about where am I creating useful digital exhaust? How can I get it, if it's meetings, transcribed into text, because that's what AI works best with,
Sure.
and how can I put it in a central location? But once you've done that, you can just ask questions, get summaries, do all of that. And AI can process in from like orders of magnitude more information faster than we can.
So
Um,
back to the workflow. You kind of design the digital exhaust in your workflow. Where does it come out of and what do you input it into? Kind of connecting it back to that.
Right. And you might have to do some creative things. If you have only in-person meetings, well, then you might want to invite Copilot into the room. Or Joanne and I had a huge amount of luck with what was the tool we used, Joanne?
Otter.
Otter
Yeah.
is a
But
third-party
there's
tool, and you just invite
so
it to
many
the.
tools now.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's being thoughtful about where you're creating the digital exhaust, and then just making sure you're capturing it in a way that you can point AI at it
Mm.
and learn from it.
I have a ripple hope off of this idea of sending agents to meetings is that all of the people that schedule these info sessions that we really don't need
Mm.
start seeing just a cloud of agents and it's like feedback to them like
Yes,
maybe I don't need this meeting. Maybe this could
yes.
be an email.
Exactly, exactly. I think that could almost be a KPI
Yeah,
that you could roll
it's a
out.
good feedback loop to build.
Humans per meeting would be
Yes.
the
Yeah.
metric.
Yeah. I have to, we can't talk about AI without talking about security because, in my work, that's one of the biggest barriers to people adopting it and really leaning into it is figuring out, keeping their data safe and even more so maybe keeping their clients' data safe. So what comes to mind? How are, in your own experience navigating some of that and best practices?
Yeah, that's a big question. Maybe I can ask Joanne to go first, and
You
I'll
jerk.
talk. Say I
Of
didn't do
all
it
the
I'm
yet,
thinking
questions
about
you
so
that
send to
one.
me first, you
I
send
took
I
it
get one
security.
or
hard.
two per.
No, all right, I'll take a stab at that. I would say one, um, go with a known provider. There are going to be, and I'm like Dean, I'm old enough to have lived through the .com. I was building web-based software at the beginning of web-based software. And I remember the moment my industry went from me and six other platforms to 36 platforms overnight. And they all got bought, including us. And then all but six of us disappeared. And
Mhm,
it was pretty much the original six. So there's going to be this wave of we've solved it. It's the best. Da, da, da. Go with known brands. There's plenty of them. You don't have to go with Microsoft or Amazon or Google. Like there are enough
mhm,
because they can't afford big security issues. And then the other thing is don't ever tell anything that you don't fully understand your personal data. Just don't. Just
mhm,
don't give it your phone number. Don't give it your social security number. Don't tell
mhm,
it about your life. If you're not 100% sure that that information lives on your device and your device alone, don't do it.
mhm,
And then on the product side, what we're doing is there are things we can do with the no code, low code apps that build up a back end for you on the fly. That's fine for like prototyping.
mhm,
But enterprise grade software, you need an architect. You need
mhm,
your environment, you need your code, you need certifications and compliance and guidance. Like, we are nowhere near the point of offloading enterprise grade security to AI.
mhm. I would just plus one that I think that is, you want to go with a provider that has good reputation for security and that is in it for the long run and is, not going to cut corners. I think that's absolutely critical. I think the being workflow first helps because then you're not randomly trying to hook up every AI technology, which creates a lot of complexity and a lot of churn. When you're really workflow first, you're like, okay, we're going to need this technology and this AI, and it just reduces sort of the surface area for something to go wrong.
Mhm.
And then the third thing I would plus one what Joanne says in AI, there can be two very distinct phases. There's experimentation to prove that something works, and that can be completely on internal servers and sandboxed and not even touching the outside world. And that is a great area for everyone who has ideas and wants to kind of prototype them to work. But then when you go to production and you're actually going to be contacting the outside world, that is where, tried and true enterprise architects, safety experts, all the things that protect other, areas of software are needed. But it leaves that experimentation period, very rich territory for bringing more and more people in.
Mhm.
And then you know when you kind of scale out, you've kind of built the right thing. So,
I think what's interesting is AI and the value prop of the tool itself is kind of like an easy button. It can process things, it can do things, but that doesn't fully translate to the strategy of how you're going to apply AI. That's still hard work. That's
right.
still complex. That's still messy. And so people are expecting because AI is positioned as the easy button to so many things that
Mhm.
the strategy behind how they use it should also be easy. It's not. And that's just the hard reality and the investment in the strategy of how you're going to use it, safely, how your team's going to change, the change management behind it. And what I'm seeing is some of the thing that's getting left behind are causing people to not use it because they're getting confused and thinking, oh, AI is the easy button. So why is this so hard to figure out how we use it
Yep.
effectively? And I
Yep.
just want to prepare for that. And
Yep. Maybe if I can just add to that,
yeah,
like if it were easy, it would never be a source of differentiation,
yep,
right? So everyone will do the easy aspects of
right,
AI.
right.
Where it's hard is when you're re-architecting workflows and you're re-architecting data flows. It's that
Mhm.
digital exhaust because
Mhm.
those are the two things that not every company will get right.
Yeah.
And so, there's a whole discipline now that's called context engineering, which is all about when you ask an AI to do something, you've got it all the information, the digital exhaust, the relevant data sources, everything it needs to get it right. Those things will be differentiators because they're hard. And the kind of simple press a button, get an answer, everyone will have that. It's kind of table stakes, but really thinking about this more comprehensive transformation is
Mhm.
where companies are going to differentiate themselves.
In the book, we use discover, design, develop.
Yeah.
And we all know that most people iterate between some version of design, not really, and develop. And our case in the book is if you really lean into discovery, whatever initiative you're running is going to go better if you do really solid discovery work and then solid design work before you
Mhm.
start developing. And AI does present the conundrum of people may just jump to develop.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I will say from our experience in the lab, where we have an emerging strategy. As a lab, we didn't say this is who we are and this is what we're building. We're saying we're going to explore and see where we're valuable. But what is emerging is partnering with experts.
Mhm.
Like one of them is Rita McGrath. We met her through the
Mhm.
book. She's got decades of strategy leadership experience, and she's got crystal clear models of building up good strategy. Turning her work into AI is really easy because she is just
Mhm.
she's done the work of laying the framework out in a way that we can tell the AI what it needs to do. If you're still figuring that out, it is going to be much longer, more iterative, and the AI is going to be less predictable.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Mhm. Awesome. Okay. We have a couple amazing questions I want to make sure that we get to. This one's really interesting. I think, Microsoft has demonstrated that, their level of experimentation and trial and error is high, right? That's how they're innovative. That's how they grow. And, Joanne, you and I are fortunate enough to work in a lab that's kind of the definition of how we work. And so for us, this concept of experimenting is natural and it's accepted, encouraged even by the organizations we're a part of. But that's not the case for everyone. And so this is an interesting question. It's how do you help people feel safe experimenting with AI when they're afraid of getting something wrong or their job doesn't allow for much experimentation?
Mhm.
Yeah. Do you want to go first on this one, Joanne? I think you've got a
I'll
wealth of
try.
knowledge.
I'll
Yeah.
try. It is a tough one. I think that is, cultural change is the hardest, and being the first or one of the first in anything is always an act of bravery, right? To show how it's done. In my experience, even in environments that we're not seemingly open to change and creativity. And I've been fortunate not to spend too much of my life in those environments, but there's always someone that is going to get excited about the new. Um, so it might be a case of quietly learning and innovating and getting good to the office framework that I love, minimum
Mhm.
trustworthy experience and
Mhm.
transformational value. Like
Mhm.
if you can just quietly be trying to solve a problem and you get it to this like minimum trustworthy level, but it's big enough change that you think somebody might appreciate it, then you just share it as an experiment and you frame it in that way of I just wanted to see what was possible. No hard feelings if you hate this. Like, say it, I'm saying it ugly. Chances are somebody else. No organization is completely against creativity. There's somebody there that will appreciate the effort. And then you're that first mover. You're that first person to get up and dance that gets the whole party dancing, right? So, but it is an act of bravery and courage.
I want to build on that really quick
Mhm.
before you chime in. I think the skill of storytelling is going to become
Yes.
so important as we continue in this
Yes.
future. And I just think there's so much interesting logic and research that goes into how like we are all as humans wired from little babies and children
Yeah.
to understand concepts and ideas and outcomes in the form of stories.
Yeah.
And there are a ton of really great story frameworks that, are applied for business. So I think as you think about experimenting and you're trying to get other, maybe people to see the value of it or to understand it, research storytelling frameworks and get really, really good at that skill because it is essential.
Yes. And
Two
I would
books.
yep, exactly.
Two books, and they live right next to me on my desk, and it's all about, and they're both by Angus Fletcher. He's another friend, but I love these books anyway. Definitely these books.
I, I was just gonna and plus one of the books, by the way, and I was gonna build because I basically this is where finding the people who have gone through the journey and are seeing the benefits of being AI first and having them tell their story because it
Mhm.
does two things. It shows that it is going to be hard, but that the payoff is worth it. And then they become a potential mentor to people who might want to go down the same journey. The other thing, though, that the question sparked for me is another framework from the book, and it is that basically most people in a company will fall into these three sort of categories: is the pioneers who love to try new things, the settlers who build on the breakthroughs of the pioneers, and the what we call town planners, which is the people who kind of thrive. They put up the structure and they really scale things. And so I would say what you probably want is, as you can identify pioneers, those are the ones who should really be aiming for the fences, thinking about transformational innovation. And the town planners should just be thinking about how to automate their day-to-day work. And that's usually something that town planners are comfortable with. This is where the rule of five comes in. Count every repetitive activity that you do 5 times a month, and then look to automate it. And depending on the size of the company, you ideally have some kind of person or a small center of excellence that's really mastered the tools that can advise. Because what'll often happen is people will see the opportunity, they'll start experimenting, it'll be frustrating, they can't kind of see a path to getting it done, and then they just go back to their day to day. So sort of like giving people based on their where they fall in that taxonomy and some central, it doesn't even have to be a dedicated team. It could be just people who have already gone down the journey and can help others on the way.
That's
Yep.
like
That's good.
the start of the garage at Microsoft,
Yeah.
right? It was just
Yes.
they called themselves a speakeasy. They got together, they chatted about innovation and projects that they have, but they became a hub in the company of
Mhm.
where people go with their ideas to ask questions. And it was very informal at first, and
Yep.
you termed this in the book the small helpful team, right? Like
Yep.
there are always
Yep.
going to be champions. So it's a leadership decision, though, to one,
Yeah.
empower those champions, put them out on the stage or at the meeting or whatever, and make sure you're balancing um, the naysayers because every culture shift, paradigm shift has the people like, this will never work, this isn't worth it. That's fear. That's fear of change. It is almost never true.
Yeah.
It's like maybe it won't work in this way or that way, but we just got to wiggle and find our way.
Yep.
So you gotta, as anybody in a position of leadership, you've gotta be careful to address the naysaying in a constructive way and not let it take hold because that can really undermine
Mhm.
progress.
Awesome. Okay, this is another question that's kind of cool because it builds off of it. So let's say, you've gone rogue, you've championed it, you've created a speakeasy, whatever you've done. This is a very real constraint is that there's a whole bunch of different AI platforms and a whole bunch of different AI tools. And if you experiment with all of them, little and little, all of a sudden your bill is not little and little, it's very
Mm.
big. And so the question as it reads is with countless AI platforms on the market, often with expensive subscriptions and duplicative features,
Mhm.
how should someone choosing to immerse themselves in AI evaluate and select the right tools for their growth?
Mhm. That is a great question, and it's really hard now because everything is changing weekly. And a new model will come out, a new platform will launch. I think the best advice I can offer is again, if you are grounded in your workflow and the areas of your workflow you want AI to change, it becomes much better and much easier, to choose a provider or to at least evaluate the providers. I think once you've done that, and to a certain extent, it's a best guess, there is a high value to continuity. A huge amount of what people are getting out of AI systems now is less about the systems themselves and the context engineering, all the information they bring that allows the AI to really understand what the objective is and to execute. So, I think what you probably want to do is do due diligence based on your workflow. Pick one that appears to be, the best aligned today and start building your scaffolding and your context engineering around it. And just have some ad hoc sampling, probably whenever a new model comes out into a new platform, just enough to kind of see, is this really an order of magnitude better? Is it worth moving? And then the other thing would be on the cost side, be super clear on your ROI model. And so, in a lot of cases, an ROI is going to be that you'll get more work done with the existing workforce. And if you can calculate that, even very crudely, you'll know how much to spend. The one that I encourage everyone to look at is how does AI help you to actually get into new business, create new products, new features, and grow your existing business as opposed to just generating efficiencies, within your workforce. But being very metric driven and goal driven in terms of the ROI is going to help you to make those difficult decisions.
Yeah. And for the general purpose, every day, read my emails, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you're probably on Google or Microsoft or somebody that provides your mail, your calendar, your search. So it makes sense to lean into their platform because it's all going to be integrated and it's only going to get better over time for their own products. It's when you get to trying to solve new problems of business, of customer facing, that's where I think it really helps. You can ask AI about AI. And one of the
Mhm.
great question is, as of this week, which platform is the best at whatever you're trying to do? And so, like, I know that Google and Perplexity are the best at cited work, like research. They
Mm,
bring the citations right up front, like they're not hallucinating and making things up. ChatGPT,
mm,
which one is the best at math, right? Like if you want to create a spreadsheet, which one is the best at visuals? If you want to create a presentation, you'll figure out whatever point in time you enter into the stream of AI changes, you'll start with somebody and then you'll see if they keep pace.
mm.
And for those applications, I think it's easier to Dean's point. Those are more um, task oriented or project oriented. So it's easier to kind of pick and choose and move. But then the third and final thing I'll say is if you're really trying to create something for other people, commercial value, don't go with an unknown
Yeah.
product, an unknown development team, somebody who may be gone in 6 months. Go with
Mhm.
people that first and foremost with people you can trust and work with them to bring in the tools you can trust because it is fast moving and you're going to need people that can keep up. If you're betting your business on it, you need people that can keep up with that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, great. We have 3 minutes. I think we can sneak in the last and final question here. And this is an interesting one. You know, if you're working at a big company, you know, like a Microsoft, and there's a shift to a new way of working, what are some of those early signals that matter that shows you're making progress in shifting how you're working?
Yeah, this is a really, really good question. Because ultimately, what you want to measure is did the new way of working create business value, right? And that is very hard, very nebulous, and complex. I think there is an approach where you start with the things you can measure, and those tend to be things like AI tool adoption and usage. Are people adopting? Are they using them regularly, making them part of their day to day? And that's pretty easy to measure. It's like any other IT, kind of measurement challenge. The second is, are we changing the ways that we work? And I haven't yet found a good sort of technical way to measure it. It tends to be a little more sort of surveys and attitudinal perspectives. There are some things like, if you are a software company, you can look at, how long from the time that an engineer submits code to when it is reviewed and merged into the main branch. So there are some kind of quasi behavioral things that you can look if you're getting agility from the investment. And then the really hard one, and I don't think anyone's cracked it yet, is that idea that we use these tools and our workflow changed like this, and we have now, driven more business value. There's a lot of companies talking about how they would like to look at, measuring the amount of time that people spend on sort of just paperwork and things versus really innovative thinking. With software developers, it's nice to look at how much time they spend writing code as opposed to reading emails and being in meetings and other things. So at this point, I think it's very industry and company specific. But if you think of those horizons, which is the adoption of AI, the change in the ways of work, and then value delivery, um, then, oh, and I did promise to Joanne I would mention this, a really good podcast on delving into how companies are trying to do this is the AI Daily Brief. And I have no affiliation with them, but they break down in about 15 minutes every day, like how different companies are trying to do this. And I think that's my best advice is find a couple good podcasts where others are trying to do it and learn from them because there's no playbook right now. We're all going to have to write it ourselves.
Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much. That brings us right to time. Every time we talk about this, there's something new that's uncovered. Even though people are like, we're talking about AI every day. It's like, well, it's changing every day. So, Dean, Joanne, thank you, thank you, thank you. Great discussion. For those on the line, we'll send follow-ups. We'll send more information as our new episodes roll out. Our next one will be on regenerative design. So keep an eye out for that. And I hope everybody has a wonderful and amazing weekend.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dean.
Thanks, Joanne and Tarn. Good to see you.
You too.
Bye bye.